So this lecture is on a nervous system, mainly on nerve tissue. We'll start with the overview of nervous system, and then we will go into the anatomy of nerve tissue or nerve cell, which is neuron. Okay, let me start the slideshow. So let's go over the nervous system. So let's see what is the nervous system. Okay, so the nervous system is one of the main system. There are two systems in our body of the 11 system. One is the nervous system, the other is the endocrine system, which are called the regulatory system. Why regulatory? Because they regulate rest of the system. They control or they give commands to rest of the system. So that's the reason they're known as a regulatory system. A nervous system definitely controls and integrates all bodily activities and helps in maintaining life. And that is the reason it is considered to be a regulatory system. There are many functions that a nervous system controls, or I would say all of the functions that is under the influence of the nervous system. Some of the major function is for the information processing. It regulates all physiological functions of the organism. It is related with memory, conscious, unconscious reasoning, rationality, speech, language, ability to project, ability to make decisions. All of this are all part of the nervous system. Thus, the nervous system has four important functions. Number one, sensory, where it gathers information from the external environment. Number two, integration, which is it processes the information that it receives. Effector, that it produces a response, a motor response, especially related with muscles. And in addition to these three, there is another important function of the nervous system, which is the internal regulator. It is responsible to keep the homeostasis of the body for optimal performance. So we will learn the first three right here. You can see it. The three major basic function is the sensory changes. That is, for example, any information that comes into existence, or you prick your finger, the information from your finger passes to the nervous system, where it processes the information in here and then passes out the information to have the action in the muscle or glands, and we learn all about it. So this is a basic or fundamental function of the nervous system, how it processes all the information. So this is basically an overview of the entire nervous system. So I want you to understand this very well, because we'll be using this slide over and over again throughout the entire nervous system when we are learning it. So the nervous system is divided into two parts. Number one is the central nervous system, called CNS, and the peripheral nervous system, which is called PNS. So if you look in here, this is shown in purple is a central nervous system, shown in yellow, and all of this is part of the peripheral nervous system. So if you see in here, the central nervous system consists of two major parts. One is the brain, the other is the spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system consists of all the nerves. So it consists of cranial nerves, it consists of spinal nerves. The cranial nerves come out from the brain and the spinal nerves come out from the spinal cord. So the entire nervous system is divided into two parts, CNS and PNS. CNS consists of brain and spinal cord. PNS consists of cranial nerves and spinal nerves. That's the basic division of it. Here is shown a much more advanced division, and we will learn as we go along the entire division, how different systems work differently. So just a little bit more information is all the information from your body, the receptors. It can be somatic receptors, it can be visceral receptors, which are present on the surface of your skin, on the surface of the different organs of your body, go through the afferent division. It's called afferent division, starts with the letter A, or it is also known as a sensory division, which goes into the central nervous system. So when I say central nervous system, I mean brain and spinal cord. From there, through the motor division or the efferent division, it goes to different parts of the body. It is divided again into two parts. One is known as the somatic nervous system, which controls the skeletal muscle, and the autonomic nervous system, which controls smooth muscles, cardiac muscles, and glands. Okay, so as we go along throughout the chapter, you will see we are learning more about the complexities and higher level of divisions of the nervous system. So, as I said, this is the brain, this is the spinal cord, and these are the spinal nerves. And you can see the peripheral nervous system, which consists of the cranial nerves and the spinal nerves, actually operate and connect to the muscle, glands, and sensory receptors. The PNS, as we just said, is divided into two major parts: somatic nervous system, which controls the skeletal muscle, and it is voluntary, it is under your control. The autonomic nervous system, which is involuntary, which is not under your control, is related with the speed of your heart. For example, if you want your heart to stop right now, it's not under your control. So the beating of your heart, how you breathe, all of it is part of the autonomic nervous system. So now the brain is actually made up of millions or billions of cells, and these cells are called neurons. Now, the central nervous system or the peripheral nervous system is made up of two kinds of cells. One are called the primary cells, which are the neurons, as you can see it on the screen. The other is, it also has supporting cells, which are known as neuroglial cells. Okay, so neurons, we're going to start with neurons, and then we are going to learn about the neuroglial cells. So the neurons are the functional unit of the nervous system. What it means is all the functions of the nervous system is done by this cell, which is known as the neurons. Okay, it has a huge capacity to do action potential, and we'll learn about action potential subsequently. So basically, any impulse, transmission of impulse from one neuron to the next neuron to the third neuron is done through the neuron itself. So it is able to transmit information and produce an effect. And that is one of the major characteristics of electrical transmission, is one of the characteristic of a neuron. So if you look in here, I have another picture in the next slide, but if you look in here, this is a neuron, and in the center you can see there is a single prominent nucleus with a nucleolus, and surrounding this structure there is purple colored structure which is called the Nissl bodies. So what are Nissl bodies? Nissl bodies are rough endoplasmic reticulum. Okay, in neurons, this rough endoplasmic reticulum is called Nissl bodies. think about the function of the rough endoplasmic reticulum. You might have learned it in your high school. You might have learned it in any other course. What is the function of the rough endoplasmic reticulum? The function of the rough endoplasmic reticulum is protein synthesis. It is the site of protein synthesis. So these rough endoplasmic reticulum in the neuron is called the cell bodies, and they are responsible for protein synthesis. Along with it, there are neurofilaments which are present in here, which is basically give it a structure. There are microtubules in the cell which also help in the formation of the structure of the cell body. Okay, now I'm going to go over some basic information before we go proceed. So the neuron in general is divided into three major parts. Okay, number one, the cell body that we just learned. Then it has two processes. One is called dendrites and the other is called axon. So I want you to understand something is that if you consider this as a neuron, suppose this is a neuron, okay? So this part in here is a cell body. These are the processes, and this is another process, okay? So this is the cell body where you can see all the rough endoplasmic reticulum, the nucleolus, and many other organelles that are present in the cell is present in the cell body, similar to that. But it has a processes that comes out, and these processes that come out from the cell body are known as dendrites. And there are many different kinds of neurons, but usually the neuron that we are talking about has one axon that comes out, and this is like it looks exactly like this, with a cell body with its processes and one axon that comes out of it. So these cell bodies are cell processes are called dendrites and axons. Okay, I want you to understand this well, because the function of each of these parts are different. Okay, the cell body that we just learned, the different organelles that are present, the nucleus is present, the rough endoplasmic reticulum is present. Remember, it also has mitochondria for its powerhouse, it has lysosomes, it has all the organelle that is present in any other cell except for one, which is called the centriole. Centriole is responsible for cell division, and that is not present in neurons. As a result, neurons do not divide. Okay, so this is the cell body, but coming out from the cell bodies are dendrites. Okay, so let's see. So this will help us to understand it even better. So if you see in here, this is the center, the cell body, and these are the dendrites. So these are, sorry about that. These are the dendrites that are coming out, and this is the axon. Okay, so as I said, if you look in here, this cell body has all the organelles except for the centriole in it. And this is the processing center. It processes information. The other processes that are coming out, these are the dendrites. These actually receive information. They take in information, and the axon actually transmits information, that it sends out information. So, for example, if I go to you and talk to you on your ear, so my mouth actually becomes the axon and your ear actually becomes the dendrite. Why? Because your ear is receiving information and my mouth is delivering information. So when it's the delivering information is done by the axon and the receiving end is the dendrites. Okay. Apart from that, you can see that let's go over the dendrites first. You can see the dendrites have several branching, right? And these branching are called spines, and they take in information. And then if you go further down in the cell body, you can see the nucleus, nucleolus. The cell body is called soma, it is called perikaryon, and cell body, so it has many names. Inside the cell body, there are missile stain structure which are known as missile bodies. There are microfilaments in these around in the cell body, which gives the neuronal cell body a structure. And these microfilaments are very, very important because the alignment, they are in a particular alignment. And when this alignment is in a disarray, it can lead to many diseases. And one of the disease, which I'm pretty sure all of you know, is Alzheimer's disease, which leads to disarray of the microfilament. So the cell body, in addition, has mitochondria, lysosome, smooth endoplasmic reticulum, all the organelles that are in any other cell is present in there. I want you to, in addition, understand that the point where the axon comes out is called the axon hillock, okay? It is very important to remember this region because it is called the trigger zone. And when we learn about the action potential, you will see the importance of this region. This is the trigger zone, which is called the axon hillock. And from there comes out the axon, okay? The axon is usually myelinated. That means it is covered like a blanket around it. There is a blanket around it, which is basically a lipid layer, which is called the myelin sheet. Okay, so these are the myelin sheet covering the axon. The myelin sheet is not continuous. There are gaps in between them, and these gaps are known as the nodes of Ranvier. And the axon further ends into the axonal terminal. There are synaptic knobs. You can see these small knobs. These synaptic knobs are also very important because they carry synaptic vesicles. What are these synaptic vesicles? These synaptic vesicles are round structure which carry neurotransmitters which are required for nerve transmission. So next few slides is going to be just a review of what we have learned right now. So you can see we are talking about dendrites, how it conducts or conducts impulse towards the cell body, that it takes in information. Usually it's short, it's highly branched, and it is not myelinated, it is unmyelinated. So these are the dendritic branching, are also known as dendritic spines. This is axon. As I said, that this comes out at a point from which it comes out is known as the axon hillock, and it conducts the impulse away from the body. It is covered by the myelin sheet, as you can see it in here, and these myelin sheets are made by a cell, or I would say the neuroglial cell, which we will learn subsequently, make these oligodendrocytes. These are myelin sheet, and those cells are called oligodendrocytes, which we will learn later on. And then these axon actually ends up into the synaptic knob. They are also known as axonal ending or axonal knob. And these swellings carry synaptic neurotransmitters, which are important for nerve impulse. Okay, so this picture actually shows you how a neuron is sending or releasing neurotransmitter to another one in order to send the impulse from one neuron to the next. So if you see this picture, you'll understand it better. One neuron is carrying an impulse and sending that impulse to the next neuron. Many such neurons are involved in the entire process, and this process by which it releases the neurotransmitter into the next neuron, the process is basically called synapse. And the neuron that sends the or releases the neurotransmitter is known as the presynaptic neuron, and the neuron that receives that and those neurotransmitters have receptors on the surface of it, and these are neurotransmitter receptors present. Once the neurotransmitter is released, these receptors take in the neurotransmitters get attached to these receptors, and the process continues. So there is a chain of events that take place in the postsynaptic neuron for the next neuron, and the process goes on from one neuron to the next neuron and so on. And I think we have a separate section where we will be learning more about synapse later on, okay? So the myelin sheath, as I was saying, these are the axons, and it is wrapped by a lipid layer, which is called the myelin sheath, okay? The myelin sheaths are made by the cell. This is called oligodendrocytes, and these oligodendrocytes are present in the CNS, and there is another cell which are known as the Schwann cells, which are present in the PNS, which is responsible for making this myelin sheath in the peripheral nervous system, neurons of the peripheral nervous system, okay? So as I said, these are Schwann cells of the PNS, Schwann cells that myelinate and wrap the neurons of the PNS. So you can see there is these lipid layers are formed, which are called the myelin sheath, and together the entire thing is known as neurolemma, which is very, very important. These myelin sheaths are responsible to increase the nerve transmission, and without these, because we do have unmyelinated neurons also in the nervous system, but the transmission of impulse in those neurons is very, very slow. So how does the transport take place in the axon? So we have to understand that the axon, I'm going to go back one slide so that I can make this point clear. So if you look in here, this is the cell body, and this is the axon. So information needs to travel from the axon to the synaptic terminal. So when it moves from the cell body to the synaptic terminal, it's known as anterograde. When the information or any material or chemicals or any substance moves from the axonal end to the cell body, it's known as retrograde. Okay, so going back to the same slide that we were talking about. So if you look in here, there are two transmissions that take place. One is known as anterograde, that is movement from the cell body to the synaptic terminal, and this task is done by a protein which is known as kinesin. Okay, so they have foot-like structure. They carry those neurotransmitters or proteins from the cell body that it's made, and then travel to the axonal terminal. This is the main way the transport usually take place. From the cell body, these proteins, the neurotransmitters, these chemicals are processed, they are made, and they travel from the cell body to the axonal terminal. But there is a way, sometimes from the axonal terminal, it goes back to the cell body, and that is done by another protein which is known as dynein. There are some examples of it. One is there are certain toxins, certain bacteria or viruses that can move from the axonal terminal to the cell body, where they can be either killed or they can, accelerate. So it depends upon the infection. Functionally, neurons can be divided into three major parts. Number one, sensory neuron, motor neurons, and interneurons. Sensory neuron are also known as afferent neuron. They travel or transmit information from the skin, the muscle, joint, organs, sense organs, visceral organs to the central nervous system. So again, when I say central nervous system, I mean brain and spinal cord. And then it is processed there. In the brain and spinal cord, it is processed there. A very good example would be, think of a situation when you are taking, you want to mail someone a card, okay? It's Christmas time, or it can be any other occasion. You want to send holiday greetings to your friends. So you are taking some letters to be mailed to maybe different places of the country. One may be Albany, the other may be Minnesota, the other may be Canada. Doesn't matter, anywhere. And there is another one of your friends, they are also bringing in different types of letters to the main post office to be distributed to different places. So once all these letters and cards come to the main mail post office, they process it. They say, okay, X number of mail is going to Albany, Y number of mail is going to maybe Detroit, Z number of mails are going to San Francisco, and different X number is again going to New York, and they process it, and then they execute it. It might be through a plane, it can be through walking, it can be through a truck. They deliver it to different parts for its execution. Same thing in here. These are sensory neurons. These letters that you are bringing in are the sensory neuron. Where are you taking it? You're taking it to the main office, and that's where the brain and the spinal cord comes into the picture. The processing that takes place is done by the interneurons, which are present in the brain and the spinal cord. There are 90% of these neurons are interneurons. And once they have been sorted out, then they are delivered back to the corresponding, with the effectors. It goes to the houses where you wanted to send those letters. So these are done by the motor neurons. Motor neurons send in information for its execution. Maybe, for example, you want to pick up some object. This picking up, the last part, is done by the motor neuron, by the skeletal muscle. So information gets in, it gets processed, and then it gets executed. Structurally, the neurons can be actually divided into four major parts. Okay, first is a multipolar neuron, and the one that we were just speaking about is multipolar, where there is a cell body, several dendrites, and one axon that comes out. Okay, so this is the multipolar, and most of the neurons in the CNS and PNS are multipolar neurons. Bipolar neurons is one main dendrite. There is one main dendrite and one main axon, and the cell body is in the center. Okay, it's found in the retina, in the ear, sensory organs. It's found mainly. Unipolar neurons. Unipolar neurons is basically pseudo bipolar neuron. That is, the cell body basically of the bipolar, when it's pushed to one side, it basically looks like the unipolar neurons. Okay, this is a very important kind because the unipolar neuron are the sensory neuron in the CNS and PNS, mainly PNS. Okay, so we will learn, when we learn a spinal cord, you will see how these cell bodies flock at one end. So these unipolar neurons have a cell body at one end, and then there is axons and the dendrites on one end branch. So it looks very different, but it is very similar to the bipolar neurons, where the cell body is in the center and it basically pushes out the cell body to look like a unipolar neuron. Axonic, apparently there is no axon, or I would say it is very difficult to know which is an axon and which is a dendrite in this case. Okay, so 4 different kinds of neuron based on their structure. Number 1, multipolar, bipolar, unipolar, and anaxonic. According to their function, there are 3 different kinds: sensory neuron, motor neurons, and association or interneurons.